All right, what's going on, you guys? Nick here with Nick's Strength and Power. So today I want to make a video about the very first ever World's Strongest Man competition. So the first ever World's Strongest Man was held in 1977, and back at that time there was no, strongman competitor. There wasn't like an amateur league, a pro league, something feeding into the World's Strongest Man competition where you had to qualify as a strongman competitor. So basically what they did back in 1977 was they took who they believed to be the strongest men in the world, just from various different sports. You had bodybuilders, you had professional wrestlers, you had Olympic weightlifters, you had football players, just kind of a hodgepodge of guys that were believed to be super strong. So I think if you guys find bodybuilding history to be interesting, you guys would find World's Strongest Man history to be even more interesting because of the humble roots that it really had and kind of the interesting aspects of who they picked to be in this first strongman competition. You had Franco Columbu, who at that time had won the Mr. Olympia the year prior. And during that 1977 World's Strongest Man, he would suffer a pretty big injury that would almost end his career, injuring his leg doing this carry where he was carrying a fridge on his back. And that would basically be the reason why a lot of people think when he came back in 1981 that his physique was so off, specifically his legs, and he had a little bit of gyno in 1981. And some people think he may have continued to compete and win Olympias had he not done that World's Strongest Man in 1977. Of course, you had the legendary Lou Ferrigno at that time. I believe 1977 was about the year that he got his Incredible Hulk deal, and he started filming the Incredible Hulk for TV. He may have even been noticed on the World's Strongest Man. That might have been where that came about. At that time, obviously, he was known for pumping iron, which had came out a couple years prior. And he was also a two-time IFBB Mr. Universe and the IFBB Mr. America. You had Patera, who was a pro wrestler. He was also a very accomplished weightlifter, in my opinion, one of the pound-for-pound strongest pro wrestlers of all time, to have come from such an accomplished weightlifting background. He was also in it. You had Bob Young, who was a football player. I believe at that time he was playing for the St. Louis Cardinals as an offensive guard. You had another bodybuilder in there by the name of Mike Dayton, who might also make an interesting video. This guy was a classic bodybuilder from back in the golden era, and he was actually an IFBB Mr. America. And he actually had a pretty incredible physique for that era. And then, of course, you had George Friend, who was a hammer thrower. You had John Cole, who was an AAU weightlifter. Then, of course, you had the winner, Bruce Wilhelm. So Bruce Wilhelm was an Olympic weightlifting champion and obviously the first ever World's Strongest Man. He's actually a two-time World's Strongest Man who would return to win again in 1978. And this guy was a pretty massive dude. This guy was 6'2", 320 pounds, or 150 kilograms. So this guy was a big guy. So not only was this lineup kind of a hodgepodge of people believed to be the best at their given sports and the strongest at their given sports, they really had no way of knowing what they were getting into and really had no way of training or preparing specifically for the World's Strongest Man like we see today. The guys that compete today are strongman competitors. They know what the lifts are going to be. They know what, all the events are going to be, and they can train for all those things at their gym leading up to the World's Strongest Man competition. So that they at least know what they're getting into, whereas these guys, it was kind of show up, see how much you can lift, see what you can do. So there were 8 men in total, and there were 10 events in total. There was one event called the barrel lift, where you basically just saw who could lift the heaviest barrel. There was an event called the bar bend, where they basically just bent a steel rod in half. And the way they judged that was the bars got increasingly thicker as they went. So whoever could bend the thickest bar was the winner of that. There was the third event called the wrist roll, where they basically just lifted 100 pounds up with a rope. Kind of an odd event. Mike Dayton won that event. You had an event called the tire toss, which, as the name suggests, they were tossing tires for distance. You had something called the tram pull, which is something you still see today, where they're pulling an 8,000-pound vehicle. And I guess that was for time. They all had to pull it 40 yards, and whoever pulled it the quickest was the winner. You had the car deadlift, which is something that you still see today as well. I believe they did that for reps. Whoever had the most reps was the winner. And then probably one of the most interesting of all these events was an event called the girl squat. So the girl squat was kind of fascinating. They had to squat girls in a cage. So yes, they literally had girls in a cage, and the men had to squat them for reps. So that's probably something you'll never see on the World's Strongest Man stage ever again. And then, of course, we have the infamous refrigerator race, where you strap a 410-pound refrigerator to your back, then you run with it. And that is actually where Franco Columbu got injured, was doing that about 10 yards in. But despite that injury, Franco Columbu still managed to place 5th out of 8 men at the 1977 World's Strongest Man. Then, of course, you also had the good old tug of war. What's a better way of judging strength than an old-fashioned tug of war? So that was in there. And after all these events were said and done, you had Bruce Wilhelm in first, you had Bob Young in second, Ken Patera in third, Lou Ferrigno taking fourth, beating his fellow bodybuilder Franco Columbu. You had Franco Columbu in fifth, obviously, John Cole in sixth, Mike Dayton in seventh, and George Friend, the hammer thrower, in eighth place. Now, another interesting little fact about this first World's Strongest Man is that 7 of the 8 competitors were from the United States. Only one, Franco Columbu, was from Italy. So obviously today we see all the competitors are from all over the world. Typically, a lot of these guys are winning from other countries that aren't the United States, but definitely in 1977, it was certainly stacked in the favor of the United States for the winner of the World's Strongest Man to be an American. So the sport of strongman has certainly come a long way in the 4 decades that it's been around since 1977, and they've really refined things in terms of the competitions, the events, the way that they train and prepare for these events. And I think the fact that there's a strongman organization where they can be pro and compete leading up to the World's Strongest Man to qualify and really as practice for the World's Strongest Man really makes it much better than 1977, just picking a bunch of random guys that were big, saying, let's see how much you can lift, and then we'll name the strongest guy World's Strongest Man. It's a much more organized, much more refined way of doing it today. But I thought you guys might enjoy that video, a little bit of history for you guys on strongman. Thank you guys for watching the video. Please give it a thumbs up if you did enjoy it. Nick Strength and Power, signing out.